Copyright owners have a number of exclusive rights, and they can transfer those exclusive rights to another party, like a publishing company. But did you know that some authors may be able to eventually reclaim the rights they transferred? In copyright law, that's called termination. In certain circumstances, the Copyright Act allows authors or specific types of heirs to terminate a grant of any of their rights using a particular procedure during a specified time frame, long after they make the original agreement. Why would an author want to terminate a grant? Authors could have a variety of reasons, like if they think the grant no longer benefits them. For its part, copyright law allows termination for any reason as long as the author meets the statutory requirements. If you're an author and decide you want to reclaim your rights, you must complete several steps and pay close attention to timing. First, you need to determine if and when you can terminate a grant. Then, you must prepare and send a notice of termination to the original grantee or that grantee's successor in title. Finally, you record that notice with the Copyright Office. Timing is crucial to a successful termination. You may only terminate grants during a specific 5-year period, and you must choose an effective date of termination that falls within that window. The timing depends on which provision of the Copyright Act applies to your grant. Generally, Section 203 applies to transfers executed on or after January 1, 1978. Section 304C applies to transfers executed before 1978. Check out our website for resources to help you determine which part of the law applies and how to figure out your termination window. You also have to give grantees between 2 and 10 years notice before the chosen effective date of termination. This means that you have to prepare a written signed notice of termination and serve it on the grantee. You must include certain information like the grantee's name, the title of the work, the author's name, and the effective date. You can find full details about what to include in the office's regulations. Finally, after serving the notice of termination on the grantee, you must record the notice with the Copyright Office. Notices submitted for recordation must comply with the office's regulations and instructions. You have until the day before the effective date of termination to complete this step. So, how does this all work? Let's look at an example. Brandon is a writer who registered his novel with the Copyright Office in 1990 and, shortly after, granted all his rights in his work to a publishing company, which published the novel that year on October 1st. Recently, Brandon's seen renewed interest in his work, and he no longer thinks the publishing agreement benefits him. He wonders whether he'll be able to terminate that grant. Since he made a grant of his copyright after January 1st, 1978, Brandon reviews the requirements in Section 203. Because he is the sole author of the work and executed the original grant to the publisher, he is able to terminate that grant. Next, Brandon visits the Copyright Office's website to figure out his termination window. Based on the book's publication date of October 1st, 1990, he learns that his termination window will begin 35 years after publication, so he has to choose an effective date of termination within 5 years after October 1st, 2025. Brandon confirms that he can prepare and serve the notice of termination at least 2 years in advance, and he chooses the first effective date of termination available to him. He prepares his notice of termination, careful to include all required information, and serves it on his publishing company on July 8, 2023. Finally, Brandon records the notice of termination with the Copyright Office, complying with all office requirements. He has until the day before the effective date of termination, or September 30th, 2025, to record the notice. So that he does not forget, Brandon submits the required documents on July 9th, 2023, the day after serving the notice of termination on his publisher. Now, Brandon only has to wait for the effective date of October 1st, 2025. On that date, the termination of his grant will be complete, and he will be able to make new agreements or self-publish his novel. To learn more about notices of termination, eligibility requirements, and recording a notice with the office, visit the Copyright Office's Notices of Termination webpage at copyright.gov/recordation/termination.html.